Bem-vindas ao pavilhão da Bacia do Congo, onde Angola está a representar-nos. Sua Excelência, Senhora Primeiro-Ministro Jorge Chicote, Excelência,
welcome to the Congo Basin
Excelência Secretária,
Pavilion, where Angola is represented by
Excelência
the First Minister.
Secretária. Não tenho retorno. Obrigada, Senhora Administradora. Excelência Secretária de Estado para o Ambiente,
Her Excellency Secretary of State for the Environment, Ms.
Paula Francisco Coelho.
Paula Francisco Coelho.
Senhora Administradora Engenheira Kátia Palanga, da Sonangola EP.
Miss Engineer Administrator Paula
Epalanga. Meus senhores e minhas senhoras,
ladies and gentlemen,
sejam bem-vindos à apresentação sobre a conservação.
Welcome to the presentation on the conservation
e restauração
and restoration
de mangás em Angola.
of the mangroves in Angola.
Angola lançou o projeto
Angola has launched the project
de geração de créditos de carbono
to generate carbon credits
através dos esforços
through the efforts
da proteção e restauração dos mangás,
of the protection and restoration of mangroves,
que visa proteger
which has the aim of protecting
a biodiversidade marinha,
marine biodiversity,
apoiar os meios de subsistência das comunidades,
to support the means of subsistence of the communities,
da orla costeira e dos pescadores,
of the coastline and of fishermen,
reduzir a pobreza e contribuir para a resiliência.
To reduce poverty and to contribute to resilience.
Temos a honra de convidá-lo para a apresentação.
We have the honor of inviting for the presentation,
que vai agora começar,
which is about to start,
por ser aberta por Sua Excelência,
to be opened,
por Sua Excelência, a Secretária de Estado do Ambiente de Angola, Senhora Paula Francisco Coelho. Muito obrigada.
To be opened by Her Excellency Secretary of State of Angola, Paula Francisco Coelho. Thank you very much.
Mais uma vez, bom dia a todos.
Good morning, everyone, once again.
Permitam-me saudar também de viva voz o nosso embaixador e secretário executivo da ACP, Dr. Jorge Chicote.
Allow me to greet also our ambassador and executive secretary, Jorge Chicote.
A distinta administradora da Sonangola EP, a doutora Kátia Palanga.
Also the administrator of Sonangol, Kátia Palanga.
Os digníssimos diretores nacionais e peritos presentes, membros da Bacia do Congo e dos países da língua portuguesa aqui presentes.
Also could you repeat that, please?
Dos dignos diretores nacionais.
The most honorable national directors,
peritos,
experts,
membros da Bacia do Congo,
members of the Congo Basin,
assim como dos países de língua portuguesa,
as well as of the Portuguese-speaking countries,
e todos os nossos convidados.
And all our guests.
Há 29 anos,
29 years ago,
desde a criação da Conferência das Partes,
from since the creation of the Convention of Parties,
que os países têm sido exortados,
countries have been encouraged
a adotar medidas para a redução de emissões de gases de efeito estufa,
to implement measures to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases,
com vista a evitar as alterações climáticas.
with the aim of preventing climate change.
No entanto,
however,
em nome do desenvolvimento, temos resistido.
However, under the name of development, we have been resisting.
E isto tem custado muito.
And this has cost us a lot.
uma vez que os efeitos das alterações climáticas
since the effects of climate change
são sentidos por todos,
are felt by everyone,
quer sejam países desenvolvidos
both developed countries
ou em desenvolvimento.
or developing countries.
Apesar de desenvolvimento significar progresso
Despite development meaning progress
e melhoria das condições de vida,
and better life conditions,
é necessário que evitemos esforços
it is necessary to make efforts
para estabilizar a crescente concentração de gases de efeito estufa
to stabilize the increasing concentration of greenhouse gases
e o consequente aumento da temperatura da superfície da Terra.
and the resulting increase of the temperature of Earth's surface.
Furacões,
Hurricanes,
cheias,
floods,
ondas de calor,
heat waves,
tempestades,
storms,
incêndios florestais,
forest fires,
entre outros desastres
and
naturais,
other natural disasters.
não selecionam áreas geográficas.
They do not select geographic areas.
Neste sentido,
In this sense,
Angola não fica de fora,
Angola is not excluded
pois tem enfrentado secas,
because it has faced droughts,
inundações
floods,
e extensão de áreas de deserto que afetam,
and extensive desertification areas which affect
em especial, as populações que vivem em áreas carenciadas.
especially people living especially in needing areas.
Os órgãos reguladores do governo de Angola,
The regulatory bodies of the government of Angola,
reconhecendo a vulnerabilidade do país,
recognizing the vulnerability of the country,
sempre procuraram criar legislação específica
have always sought to find specific legislation
para orientar empresas e indivíduos
to guide companies and individuals
sobre a proteção do ambiente,
on the protection of the environment,
desde a criação da
from the creation of Law Number 5,
de 1998, Lei de Bases do Ambiente,
1998, the Law of Basis of the Environment,
ao recente Decreto Presidencial número 117/20,
to the recent Presidential Decree 117/20
sobre a avaliação de impacto ambiental
on the variation of environmental impact
e do procedimento de licenciamento ambiental.
and environmental licensing procedure.
Em particular,
Namely,
o órgão regulador das atividades petrolíferas
the regulatory body for oil activities
tem procurado ser proativo
has sought to be proactive
ao trazer a atenção dos operadores
to bring to the attention of operators
a necessidade urgente
the urgent needs
de serem identificadas oportunidades
to identify opportunities
e ações
and actions
com foco na redução das emissões de carbono
focusing on reducing carbon emissions
para uma maior resiliência climática.
for a greater climate resiliency.
Tem com isto formulado, conduzido, executando
As such, as formulated, carried out,
controlando e acompanhando as políticas
and monitoring policies
relacionadas às atividades geológicas
related to geologic activities
e minerais de petróleo,
and oil minerals,
gás
gas,
e
and
biocombustíveis,
biofuels,
sem prejuízo para a proteção do ambiente.
without prejudice to the protection of the environment.
Assim,
Therefore,
em especial destaque para os regulamentos que devem ser implementados,
and with a special focus on the regulations that must be implemented,
com vista à redução da queima do gás
with the aim of reducing gas burning
proveniente da atividade de exploração petrolífera
resulting from the oil exploration activity
que ocorre no país.
which takes place in the country.
O projeto Angola LNG,
The project Angola LNG,
que começou a ser implementado em 2008,
which started to be implemented in 2008,
tornou possível o aproveitamento dos recursos de gás natural,
enabled the use of natural gas resources,
fornecendo energia limpa através da recolha de gás associado dos campos de petróleo e do offshore angolano,
enabling the collection of gas resulting from the oil fields in Angola,
reduzindo a necessidade de queima
reducing the need to burn,
e, consequentemente, a emissão de gases de efeito estufa para a atmosfera.
and consequently the emission of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere.
No entanto,
However,
para vencermos esta corrida
in order to win this race,
rumo à redução das emissões de gases de efeito estufa,
to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases,
é necessário que sejam adotadas
we need to adopt
não apenas medidas de redução,
not only measures to reduce,
mas também de compensação das emissões.
but measures also to compensate emissions.
Por este motivo,
Therefore,
Angola aprovou recentemente projeto de compensação de emissões
Angola recently approved a project for the compensation of emissions
através da proteção de ecossistemas de mangais.
through the protection of mangrove ecosystems.
Os mangais são locais de reprodução para milhares de espécies marinhas
Mangroves are places of reproduction for thousands of marine species,
e as suas raízes ajudam a estabilizar o solo,
and its roots help to stabilize soil,
prevenindo a erosão nas linhas costeiras,
preventing erosion on the coastline.
funcionam como amortecedores costeiros naturais,
They work as natural coast dampeners
contra tempestades e calemas,
against storms.
diminuem a probabilidade de inundações,
They reduce the possibility of floods.
ajudam a manter a qualidade da água,
They help to improve water quality,
filtrando poluentes
filtering pollutants,
e prendendo sedimentos provenientes da costa,
and storing sediments coming from the coast,
além de que dão suporte
besides supporting
e proteção às espécies ameaçadas em risco de extinção.
and protecting endangered species in risk of extinction.
Mais do que isso,
Even more so,
os mangás constituem o mais importante ecossistema
mangroves constitute the most important ecosystem
na luta contra as alterações
in the
climáticas,
fight against climate change,
pela sua grande capacidade de absorção
due to its great capacity of absorption
de dióxido de carbono.
of CO2.
Angola tem uma extensão de 1.650 km de costa marítima
Angola has an extension of 1,650 kilometers of coastline,
e ao longo dela
and throughout the coastline,
são encontrados ecossistemas de mangás.
mangrove ecosystems.
Considerando que
Considering that
em alguns lugares já são visíveis impactos negativos causados pelas atividades humanas,
in some places it's already to see the negative impacts of human activity,
torna-se imperiosa a implementação de carbono azul,
it is imperative to implement the project of blue carbon,
com vista à recuperação dos ecossistemas degradados
aiming to recover degraded ecosystems
e à conservação daqueles ainda intactos.
and to preserve the ones that are still intact.
Ao apoiar o projeto de proteção dos mangais,
By supporting the project for the protection of mangroves,
está a ser dado o primeiro passo para a mudança de paradigma
we are giving the first step for a change of paradigm
na abordagem das alterações climáticas,
in the fight against climate change,
levando resiliência às comunidades locais,
bringing resilience to local communities,
ao mesmo tempo que se continuará a investir
whilst continuing to invest
em tecnologias mais limpas
in cleaner technologies
a fim de reduzir as nossas emissões.
in order to reduce our emissions.
Participar desta conferência
By participating in this conference,
está a ser uma oportunidade para uma demonstração de comprometimento
it is an opportunity to demonstrate the commitment
para com os compromissos assinados no Acordo de Paris,
the commitment towards the undertakings signed in the Paris Agreement,
bem como troca de experiências
and to exchange experiences
para a implementação de outros projetos.
in the implementation of other projects.
Juntamo-nos assim
Therefore, we gather
à luta contra as alterações climáticas.
in the fight against climate change.
Agradecemos a atenção dispensada
We thank you for your attention,
e declaramos aberto o nosso side event.
and we declare opened our side event.
Muito obrigada.
Thank you very much.
Muito obrigada, Excelência Secretária de Estado do Ambiente, Paula Francisco Coelho.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Secretary of State of Environment, Paula Francisco Coelho.
Vou igualmente pedir a presença do engenheiro Giza Martins, ele que é Diretor Nacional do Ambiente e Ação Climática da NDC Angola.
I'll also like to request the presence of Engineer Giza Martins, Director of the Environment of.
Muito boa tarde já a todos os participantes se calhar devíamos fazer isto já em inglês, não?
Good afternoon to all the
So
participants.
good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for joining us in the presentation of our national strategy. I'm wondering if is there a way that I can flip the presentation from here? I have to give you a sign. Very good. Okay. So you can go ahead and flip it. So we've been asked to share with you our national strategy, and we'll include as well the essential aspects of our NDC. So please change. Please change. Firstly, why was it necessary for us to devise a new climate strategy in Angola? We had a climate strategy that was intended to have been implemented between 2007 and 2012, and given changes in the global environment with regards to climate change, it was necessary to do so. That strategy also had a focus on establishing the institutions that would enable climate action, as well as establish the framework for reporting under the UNFCCC. Whereas we thought that the direction in which we needed to go was to enable climate action in Angola. So beyond reporting, enable the introduction of climate considerations into sectorial policy making. Um, we thought it was necessary to strengthen our position during international negotiations, of course, and strengthen our capacity, institutional and human capacity, to enable climate change. So the next few slides attempt to characterize Angola. I think we can skip those, and we can skip. They essentially characterize Angola's geographical position and impacts of climate, both currently and what they're expected to be in the future. We can perhaps stop there. This slide in particular reflects the occurrence of extreme weather events, in particular drought in the southwest of Angola. And uh, among other things, this strategy, the strategy that we will present, equips us to be able to uh, update this climate profile continually, and of course identify those areas wherein vulnerabilities are of particular concern. The next slide shows our emissions profile in up to 2005. So this reflects that from the first national inventory that was done. As you can see, the enter, which includes fugitive emissions associated with the oil industry, is the sector that uh, occupied the most proportion of our emissions. If we bring the next slide, this is now data that covers this is an inventory that covers data up to 2015, and there are structural changes in our profile. Whereas energy was the most concerning factor or sector in 2005. In 2015, LULUCF, which is land use change, and forestry, has increased significantly. So, and we attribute this change, this structural change, to two factors. One is the fact that our ability to gather data improved significantly. And the second one is that we have to recognize that Angola's economy has changed profoundly. The country has changed profoundly. In 2002, with the advent of peace, there was rapid urbanization, there was a significant increase in economic activity, including agriculture and other agro-pastoral activities, which leads to this. I think the challenge for climate action is to exactly attempt to decouple economic growth, population growth from emissions growth. Um, and I think that what will be presented here is an attempt at doing just that. So, if we can have the next slide, please. We can skip this. We could do the next slide. All right. So, our NDC. Our NDC, which is our nationally determined contribution, is proposing to reduce by 30% carbon intensity in the production of electricity. This is an unconditional um, contribution that Angola is making with vis-a-vis climate action. We then propose to decrease a further 15% of emissions in other activities such as agriculture, as well as we have also identified actions in adaptation, which do not necessarily have an emissions outcome, but also can be considered climate action, part of our effort to contribute to climate action globally. Next one, please. So, next one. So, our strategy. So, Angola adopted about a week ago exactly, a long-term strategy for climate action, which is a strategy that is meant to be implemented between 2021 and 2035. It aims really at ensuring and giving a sense of direction and permanence in that direction in terms of climate action. Its mission is to achieve an Angola that is adapted to the impacts of climate change, that has adopted a low carbon development pathway or model, but that also contributes to the eradication of poverty. So it assumes that the eradication of poverty is the greater goal, and climate action in many ways need to contribute towards that. Next, please. Next, you could give me the next one. Next one. Next one. Very good. So the climate change has the policy has five pillars. One is climate mitigation. The second one is climate change adaptation. The third one is institutional capacity building and technology transfer. The fourth one is climate finance, very important at this COP. And the fifth one is research, systematic observation, and analysis. For each one of these pillars, the strategy has identified a number of actions or pathways with and within each there are goals and targets that we propose that we achieve within the time frame of the implementation of the strategy, as well as of course we identify institutional capacity building needs for the attainment of objectives and goals for each of the pillars. So next one. For instance, in under the mitigation pillar, those are of course the sectors that would be covered: is energy, agriculture, forestry, and land use, industry, and waste. What things do we? Where are the opportunities? At least through 2035 in Angola, it's low carbon electricity production, it's rural access to low carbon energy, it's electrical sector regulation, low carbon transport, energy efficiency, low carbon street lighting or public illumination, fugitive emission reductions. Well, this event is all about fugitive emission reductions, low carbon agriculture, forest management. This event is also about forest management and other land use change, energy efficiency in industry, and waste management. So these are the pathways for action through 2035. For each of them, there are goals and targets. I know that, for instance, for low carbon energy production, the target was actually announced by His Excellency the President of the Republic during his statement, which is to increase by 70%, not by 70%. So it was actually an increase of 10%. Currently, our energy matrix has about 60% renewable energy production, and we aim to achieve by 2025 70%. So increase by 10% the renewable energy production in Angola. That is something that would contribute towards that. In the adaptation pillar, these are the actions that we think are necessary. sustainable agriculture, sustainable diets, sustainable fishing, protection of um, um, riverfront and coastal areas. This is really more about coastal areas, of course, forest, ecosystem, and biodiversity production. The project that will be presented to you certainly falls within A5 as well. Um, River basin management, drought risk management, that is about installing early warning systems and improving the resiliency of populations. Flood risk management, same thing. Potable water for everyone, that is about ensuring that communities have access to water. Tropical disease monitoring and preservation and prevention. This is about health and the nexus between climate change and health. Sanitation, and as well construction and resilient infrastructure. So these are the actions that these are the pathways for action in the adaptation pillar. And of course, again, for each one of those, there are specific targets within the strategy, as well as capacity and technology transfer needs assessed and identified. If I can have the next one. This is capacity building and technology. We split them. We identify two categories of course, institutional capacity building, and the other one is in the academic sphere, including, of course, school at all levels. Next one. On climate finance, we, among other things, identified the need to establish a national climate fund, which eventually will do so. But most importantly, we defined the need to maximize the mobilization of resources to do climate action, both domestic and international resources. And we recognize the contribution that carbon markets can play to that end. Research and systematic innovation are about really addressing our need to deepen our understanding of how climate parameters have been changing over time and how they have been affecting our social and economic life. So this is about expanding and standardizing our climate parameter observation network through, of course, the meteorological services. It is about being able to develop climate models that are done for Angola. They are global models that are not necessarily downscaled to Angola's reality. That downscaling requires data. And so sequentially, we in essence go through expanding our capacity to obtain data, modeling that data, and then analyzing that data so that we can inform policymaking in that are sensitive to climate. Next one. So next one. Just before. So how it is that we would like to implement this strategy? We identified four implementing mechanisms. One is, of course, coordination. Climate action is dependent upon coordination. The greater the quality of coordination at the national level as well as international, the more success we have. So the primary, the most important instrument for the implementation of the strategy is, of course, coordination. And we have therefore adopted or approved a national climate change and biodiversity, which is an interministerial committee that will enable this coordination. This committee is chaired by His Excellency the President of Angola, and includes the line ministries that are sensitive to climate. Secondly, we have established our national MRV system that includes four subsystems. One is a greenhouse gas inventory subsystem. The second one is a mitigation measures subsystem. Third one is an adaptation measures subsystem, and the fourth is a financial and technical and support subsystems, which aims really at tracking those financial flows that are going towards climate action in Angola, independent of its source, whether national or international. Next one. Well, this is our MRV system, a little bit more elaborated, of course. It provides for having a methodology plan and, of course, a database, a knowledge management system, and a plan for capacity building throughout sectors. Give me the next one. Um, so before I talk a little bit about this slide, there are two other instruments that that are included in the strategy. The fourth one is a national climate observatory, climate and environmental observatory, which is a repository of data. So the data that we will be generating, particularly through systematic observation and analysis, and as well as other economic and social indicators, will be deposited at a national observatory, wherein the research and the recommendations, policy recommendations, will emerge from. And the fourth one, of course, is the National Climate Change Fund. This simply illustrates the set of actors or stakeholders that are involved, that are required in order to do climate action. And beyond government, of course, they include civil society, public institutions, academic institutions, local government, provincial governments, etc., universities, civil society, and so on. So we assume this strategy relies upon a good partnership among national and international stakeholders. Next one, and this is thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Dr. Giza Martins. Vamos então ver agora um vídeo da apresentação sobre o projeto OTCHIVA.
We're going to watch a presentation video on the OTCHIVA project now.
Eu acredito que há muitos anos recebemos um presente de valor incalculável, um berço de vida e de abundância que precisamos preservar, que como os nossos mais velhos, somos irmãos das aves e dos peixes e conhecemos a língua das águas. Eu sei que somos angolanos, somos africanos, somos cidadãos do mundo e da cubata, somos do conhecimento e da tradição, dos ritmos do tambor e do coração. Também acredito que sabemos receber o que a natureza nos dá, lhe devemos estar gratos, que temos a responsabilidade de proteger quem cuida de nós, de ensinar aos nossos filhos que quando cuidamos das nossas raízes podemos ser gigantes, podemos ser pais das nossas famílias e líderes dos nossos destinos. Sim, eu também sei que somos sangue, suor e carne e que somos ventre, que aprendemos a achar água no deserto e a plantar nas cinzas, porque se cada um fizer, a África pode. E também aprendi que quando se apagam as luzes, o céu fica mais brilhante e que as estrelas nos podem mostrar um novo caminho.
Obrigada. Eu gostava de chamar então a presidente da Associação OTCHIVA, Fernanda René, para falar-nos sobre o projeto de conservação e restauração de mangás em Angola. Ela que também foi nomeada recentemente pelo Presidente da República como sua conselheira. Fernanda René, muito obrigada.
I'd like to invite Fernanda René, the president of OTCHIVA Association, for the conservation and restoration of mangroves in Angola. She was also recently nominated as a councillor by the president.
Boa tarde a todos.
Good afternoon.
Boa tarde, sou secretária de Estado do Ambiente,
Good afternoon, everybody.
senhor embaixador Jorge Chicote, senhora administradora da Sonangol, área do Ambiente, digníssimos convidados e obrigado por estarem todos aqui presentes.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon to the Secretary of State of Environment of Angola. Good afternoon to the Ambassador, Mr. Chicote. Good afternoon to the Administrator of Sonangol for the sector of the environments, and good afternoon to everybody else present.
Nós somos, sou Fernanda René, sou coordenadora do projeto OTCHIVA, OTCHIVA que significa Zona Úmida na língua Umbundo.
My name is Fernanda René. I'm the coordinator of the OTCHIVA project. OTCHIVA means humid zone in the Umbundu language.
É projeto que se dedica inteiramente na proteção e restauração dos mangás na costa de Angola.
And this project is dedicated exclusively to the protection and restoration of mangroves on the Angola coastline.
Os mangás, para quem os mangás podemos definir os mangás como zonas de transição entre o ambiente terrestres e marinhos. Eles são praticamente o berçário da vida marinha, habitat de muitas espécies, como a destacar aqui as aves migratórias. Também são zonas de subsistência de muitas comunidades de pescadores.
So mangroves are transition areas between the terrestrial and the marine environments. They are the birthplace of many marine species. They are the habitats of many migratory birds, and they are an area of a source of subsistence for many people.
É importante destacar aqui que as florestas de mangás têm a particularidade de absorver mais dióxido de carbono do que qualquer outra floresta terrestre.
There's a specific characteristic which is important to mention here, which is that the mangrove forests absorb more CO2 than any other terrestrial forest.
Facto este que torna este ecossistema especial no combate às alterações climáticas.
And that factor makes these ecosystems special in the fight against climate change.
Mas infelizmente, mesmo com a importância dos mangás como berçário da vida marinha, habitat de muitas espécies, zonas de subsistência para as comunidades de pescadores, infelizmente estes ecossistemas estão a ser destruídos.
But unfortunately, even though these mangroves, they are the birthplace of many marine species, they are the habitat for many migratory bird species, they are an area that many fishermen depend on for subsistence. Despite all of these areas are still being destroyed.
Temos aqui alguns exemplos das ações que causam a destruição destes ecossistemas. Temos aqui o lixo, não é? Os resíduos sólidos urbanos, que causam a morte de várias espécies, porque são muitas espécies, como as aves migratórias, por exemplo, que confundem o plástico com alimentação. Logo daí causa a redução de muitas espécies.
We've got some examples here. For example, waste, solid residues from urban areas. There are, many species in the mangroves that are affected by this waste. For example, birds which confuse plastics with foods, and which are affected by these wastes.
Temos aqui outro tipo de destruição que nós OTCHIVA achamos a mais perigosa, que é as construções nas zonas de mangás, não é? São várias empresas que entulham os mangás, as zonas de mangás, para construções de portos, estradas, infraestruturas, e esta é a maior destruição, porque o lixo podemos limpar, mas as construções nessas zonas causam o desaparecimento do ecossistema. Daí são vários impactos, como podemos citar aqui, os pescadores, não é, perdem a sua zona de subsistência.
Okay, and the next one is the one that we at OTCHIVA think is the most dangerous of all, which is the construction in the mangrove areas. So where these mangrove areas are basically built upon to are filled in to build ports, roads, other infrastructures, and we consider this to be the most dangerous because wastes we can clean up wastes, but when it's constructed upon, then it basically represents the disappearance of this environment which many fishermen depend on for their livelihood, for example.
Quando nós destruímos gás, são vários impactos resultantes dessa destruição. Temos aqui a erosão. Isto porque os mangás servem de bacias de retenção das águas pluviais.
So when we destroyed mangroves, there's many impacts on that. For example, erosion, because mangroves tend to act as repositories for the retention of river waters.
Temos aqui também outro impacto da destruição dos mangás, a erosão costeira. Isto porque os mangás são os protetores da orla costeira contra as ações erosivas das ondas.
Another example here is coastal erosion, because mangroves tend to act as a buffer zone for the protection of the coastline from the erosion from the sea.
Temos aqui a extinção de algumas espécies marinhas, isto porque os mangás é o berçário de 80% da vida marinha.
Another one here is the extinction of marine species, fish species, because mangroves are the birthplace of 80% of all marine species.
Ainda temos outros impactos, que é a morte de várias espécies. Aqui destacamos as aves migratórias.
Another impacts the death of several species, and here we highlight migratory birds.
Temos aqui ainda, quando há poluição petrolífera, é a causa, não é? A degradação das florestas de mangás.
Another one here, the pollution resulting from oil activity causing degradation in the mangrove areas.
E aqui temos a perda da zona de fonte de renda de várias comunidades que têm os mangás como a sua fonte de subsistência na exploração de peixe, crustáceos, moluscos.
And also the loss of income from communities who depend on mangroves for their income through fishing activities of fish, crustaceans, mollusks.
O que é que nós, Projeto OTCHIVA, temos feito para a nossa contribuição para mudar o quadro da destruição dos mangás? Temos trabalhado na educação e sensibilização ambiental.
So what do we at OTCHIVA have we been doing to change this framework, to change this picture? Well, we've been working on environmental education and awareness.
A nossa educação ambiental tem sido feito nas comunidades, isto como as comunidades exploram os mangás, nós sensibilizamos as comunidades para o uso sustentável dos recursos que eles exploram nos mangás.
So our environmental education has been carried out with communities who use the mangroves to make sure that they use them in a sustainable manner.
Para além da educação nas comunidades, também trabalhamos na sensibilização aos nossos gestores públicos, porque normalmente são os nossos gestores que têm que autorizam, não é, aos empresários construírem nestas zonas de mangás.
We've also been carrying out awareness with public managers, public directors, because normally it is these public directors who will subsequently authorize private developers to build on these mangrove areas.
E também trabalhamos com os empresários, muitas das vezes petências para construir mangás, sobre a importância destes ecossistemas úmidos.
And we also do work near business developers who quite often want to build on these mangrove areas to basically raise their awareness on the importance of these ecosystems of these areas.
Portanto, para além da educação ambiental, também temos ações de restauração destes ecossistemas degradados. Fizemos limpeza nos mangás.
In addition to awareness and education, we also carry out restoration activities of mangroves. So, for example, we've been carrying out the cleaning of these areas.
Fizemos a reflorestação nestes ecossistemas.
We've been carrying out reforestation in these ecosystems.
E alguns resultados é a restauração de várias zonas de mangás degradadas.
And as a result of that, there's been a restoration of some degraded mangrove areas.
Quando nós limpamos os mangás, são várias espécies que retornam a estes ecossistemas.
When we clean mangroves, there are several species that do return to these ecosystems.
E automaticamente as comunidades de pescadores retornam também nestas zonas.
And automatically the fishermen communities also return to these areas.
Este nosso trabalho já teve vários reconhecimentos internacionais. Fomos nomeados pela ONU ano passado como finalista dos Jovens Campeões da Terra.
We've had several international recognition on these. So, for example, last year we were nominated as a fan for the Young Champions of the Earth.
Ainda o ano passado fomos premiados pela União Africana pelo nosso contributo na sustentabilidade ambiental em África.
We got a prize last year from the African Union for our contribution for the sustainability in Africa.
Tivemos a sorte de termos o senhor vice-presidente da República e agora o presidente da República no apoio para a proteção e restauração dos mangás.
We've been fortunate enough to have the support of the Vice President of the Republic and now the actual President of the Republic to support this project for the restoration of the mangroves.
Mas não é pelos prêmios que nós agimos, não é pelos reconhecimentos. O que nós mais auguramos no projeto OTCHIVA é termos uma lei de proteção dos mangás.
But it's not the prizes that motivate us. We don't do these because of the prizes or because of the recognition. At Project OTCHIVA, what we want most of all is to have a law for the protection of mangrove areas.
Nós auguramos também uma gestão eficaz dos resíduos sólidos urbanos, uma vez que a montante, ou seja, tem sido um problema muito na morte, na degradação do próprio ecossistema de mangás.
We also want an effective management of urban solid waste. This has been a big problem for mangroves, causing the death of many species and the degradation of mangrove areas.
E auguramos também que os ecossistemas de mangás e outros ecossistemas que compõem o planeta Terra fossem enquadrados nos planos diretores provinciais.
And we would also like that mangrove ecosystems and other ecosystems on Earth would be included in the director plans for the various regions.
E claramente desejamos também que todos os detratores dos mangás fossem implementados uma multa pesada por destruírem estes ecossistemas.
And we'd also like that anyone destroying the mangroves would receive a fine penalty, a heavy penalty for destroying these ecosystems.
Exato. Portanto, estes todos os esforços na proteção e restauração dos mangás, vimos que é um potencial para a geração de créditos de carbono.
So all these efforts towards the protection and restoration of mangrove areas, we can see a potential here for the generation of carbon credits.
Por isso é que lançamos com o apoio da Sonangol o projeto Sonangol Carbono Azul.
And that's why we launched, in collaboration with Sonangol, the Sonangol Blue Carbon Project.
Que consiste exatamente na geração de créditos de carbono através do esforço da conservação e restauração dos mangás.
which consists in the generation of carbon credits through the conservation and restoration of mangroves.
Com o objetivo principal de apoiar os meios de subsistência das comunidades da costa e dos pescadores,
With the main objective of supporting the means of subsistence of the coastline communities and fishermen,
reduzir a pobreza e contribuir para a resiliência.
to reduce poverty and to contribute towards resiliency.
Portanto, em Angola, o mercado de carbono ainda não implementado.
In Angola, the carbon market has still not been implemented.
Por isso temos muitos desafios pela frente.
So we're facing many challenges ahead.
Porque nós vamos trabalhar agora num futuro próximo sobre qual metodologia iremos usar,
So in the near future, we're going to work on which methodology we're going to use,
como iremos medir estes créditos de carbono
how will we measure these carbon credits,
e principalmente o desafio no alcance da certificação. Sim.
and mainly the challenge in achieving certification.
Portanto, temos aqui um país na sala, o queniano Vincent Oweba, cujo seu país já implementado o projeto de crédito de carbono nos mangás.
So we've got someone present here in the room, Mr. Vicente Oweba from Kenya, a country which has already implemented a carbon credit system for mangroves.
Que convido o Vicente para fazer pequenos comentários sobre o mercado de carbono no seu país. Penso que 2 minutos a 3. Vicente, por favor, e obrigado.
And I would like to invite Vincent for 2 or 3 minutes to come and talk a little bit about the carbon market in his country. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, Fernanda, Your Excellency, and the high delegates of Angola for the opportunity again to partner with you during this COP26. It's quite exciting. And I'm quite happy that given the highlights provided on your climate change strategy, you have also looked at how your targets moving towards emission reduction and going to zero net by 2030 or that. And I'm also glad to note that after coming to Angola around, I think it was July, that the ideas we discussed are graduating into a project. I'm also seeing a couple of participants who were there. This is quite a commendable work, and I want to congratulate you for the very good step you are making in this process. In view of what has just raised on the challenges that are most likely faced in this particular project, I just want to mention that Kenya, as one of the African countries, we have also the coastal belt that consists of a lot of mangroves. And of course, you're also having the same challenges that Angola is facing in terms of going back to restore the degraded mangroves. And in this perspective, we have already established one key project, our first one ever in the world to be accredited. We call it Mikoko Pamoja. Mikoko is mangrove, Pamoja is coming together. So we are looking at the actors between the government of Kenya, the communities, and the development partners to join hands, ideally, to move towards conservation of the mangroves. And what we are looking there in terms of methodology, we look at what kind of plan or a standard we use in terms of carbon estimation and reporting. We opted to go Plan FIFO standards that has a clearly described methodologies that people follow on this. And in this particular approach, you need to look at, one, if you have the mangrove like that one, avoided deforestation of the mangroves, meaning that you don't want, again, to continue cutting it. You want to restore the carbon that's already captured by the mangroves. So you call it avoided deforestation and restoration of the mangrove. So it means areas zoned out and mapped to be conserving carbon, which will also be in line with your strategy, which I just highlighted, that the LULUCF, the Land Use and Cover Forest Change, has a huge contribution, about 70% from what I saw in terms of your emissions. So it means if it gets into your hunting, your system, then it's going to help a lot in terms of sinking that amount of carbon. So what it requires is that we establish a methodology that you will be reporting on the basis of avoiding deforestation and enhancing restoration of that ecosystem. Number two, if you look at a place like this as open, it means you're going to do reforestation. You want to reforest already areas open. So that again, it has its own way to estimate the amount of carbon that this particular mangrove, the species will be selecting, as they grow, their potential to exponentially sequester carbon. And therefore, that way, you are not to report how much is that. It means that area will be rehabilitated and it will be able to contain amount of CO2 that will be able to sequester over a period of time you're providing. The other one is afforestation. There are areas which are completely bare and you feel they need to go back in the mangrove. So those three tiers will assist Angola to report on the amount of emissions that the mangrove ecosystem will be able, ideally, to actually sequester. And in so doing, you will be able to report in your national communication, in your nationally determined contributions. Because the beauty of venturing into this kind of projects, it will enable the country to accelerate the opportunity exists in a global space, more so on the carbon market and trading. And in this case, for the Plan FIFO, it considers the drivers of deforestation. How do you blow back the returns from the carbon market in the community? And that way, you require, as a country, what you call a carbon benefit sharing mechanism between the communities, the state, and the owner of the resource. So as the resource come back there, goes back to really assist the country so it doesn't go back to the drivers of deforestation. And that's now what we require to monitor, because for you to monitor, you must have the baseline indicators. And the one way to see the growth rate of your mangroves, the reduced rate of deforestation, the enhanced biodiversity within the ocean system there. And at the end of the day, you will be able to see their contribution they're having in the overall picture of this. And the beauty of this monitoring, it goes to what you just mentioned, that it can go into a national monitoring reporting system. We call it National Forestry Information System, that will assist you to compartmentalize the different segments of LULUCF in your national reporting. So that becomes quite useful in this case. The issue of certification, once you are given in a certain standard, of course, for you to be a project to gain the returns, there's what you call the validation. We have the validators who are qualified globally, who will come and assess the project and see in each reporting period how much carbon has your project been able to reduce. And it takes into account areas you've mapped known to be leakages. A leakage means that you don't only conserve, and then the same activity is taking place elsewhere. That must be avoided. So when you report in that process, you can be given a certificate on the basis of the validators. So which says that under this validation process, you have been able to sequester this amount of CO2, and therefore you are eligible for gaining the credit. And this is the certificate that actually is issued on the basis of the efforts you've made to reduce those emissions, which again are awarded in any given market. And this market, as we discuss here, under the Kyoto Protocol, which you're familiar, and I'm sure you know what's the African portion will look like, whether I want to go into the third commitment period, we are saying that under this Kyoto Protocol, we have a compliance market, where our projects that we generate are what called certified emission reductions that you take in the market. But of course, this project like this under Plan FIFO, it works fairly well in the voluntary carbon market, which was professionalized by the process of reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. And therefore, here we generate voluntary emission reduction. So whatever the way this project can take, on the decision of the Angola government, in this case here, you will be able to actually either venture into certified emission reduction process or a frontal emission reduction of this. By so doing, then you are able to participate in the voluntary carbon market. You cannot sell your carbon if you have not fulfilled the prescription of the methodologies that are given there. And it must coincide with three important principles: the permanence of your project. And that's why I'm happy to mention in terms of regulation, policy, which the government usually takes center stage to ensure that whatever you want to avoid does not again reoccur. And that way, you'll be able to access that. That permanence becomes very important. Leakage is another issue. You don't transfer your action, say, site A to site B, not allowed. Finally, additionality, that you cannot do this activity without carbon financing. And I'm sure this is one of the reasons why we are all seated here with the beauty of your engagement, that you are want to attract more investors, that you can plow in the carbon financing so as to assist the country move fast in accelerating its ambitions or your ambitions towards the 2030 target of your strategy. So through doing that, I'm sure that it will be quite a commendable intervention that we'll be dealing with. We have good experience from the country in Kenya. We are your brothers. We are willing again to plow back our experiences, our challenges, our gains. So as when you pick this project, you don't simply fall back the same challenges. You go to the opportunities where they are and make success. And I want to take this opportunity to thank OTCHIVA very much because of your time. And the Excellence, the President of Angola, for this very noble commitment to conserve the mangroves. Globally, mangroves, wherever they are known to sequester a significant amount of carbon vis-a-vis the terrestrial ecosystems. And there are so many advantages, so many advantages. We are moving towards a blue economy. In the SDGs, a blue economy is, we are moving to be part and parcel of our commitment. And the blue economy will only come in when we consider this nature of biodiversity you're talking about there. So you are on the correct track, and I'm privileged to be with you here. It's a honor, actually. And I want to appreciate OTCHIVA for persistence. Fernanda is very persistent. They have to be here, of course, with my Kenyan delegation, but an African, we have one common voice. It's good to share this kind of experiences and move forward so as you can be able to attend this. These are commendable work. We are available. We shall that can support require and linkage a network so as you move forward as a country. I think those few remarks, Fernanda, I wish to hold there and congratulate once more the High Excellency and the Ambassador for joining your hands and seeing you. And I'm sure we'll be together in this process of discussion and negotiations. Thank you very much, and God bless you all.
Muito obrigada, Mr. Vicente Oeba, pela magnífica aula que acabou de nos dar. Sabemos que vamos poder contar consigo para ajudar-nos na metodologia de captação de créditos de carbono. A Sonangol está muito feliz porque conseguimos daqui tirar e saber que vamos aprender e desenvolver mais e mais. Vamos então agora passar um vídeo sobre o projeto Carbono Azul.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vicente Weber. Thank you for sharing your experience and for us being able to count on you to share your methodology on carbon credits. We're now going to watch another video.
A Sonangol está empenhada em reduzir os impactos ambientais que são gerados no desenvolvimento das suas atividades. E uma vez que estes não podem ser totalmente eliminados, optou também pela implementação de ações de compensação ambiental. O projeto Sonangol Carbono Azul consiste na implementação de programas que visam a redução das emissões de gases de efeito de estufa e na reflorestação e conservação das florestas dos mangais, que têm a capacidade de absorver 5 vezes mais dióxido de carbono do que as florestas terrestres. Neste sentido, a Sonangol aceitou o desafio lançado pela OTCHIVA, a única associação ambientalista angolana que se dedica integralmente à proteção das zonas úmidas, em particular dos mangais.
Os mangás é o berçário da vida marinha e habitat de muitas espécies. Dos mangás dependem muitas comunidades de pescadores na exploração de peixes, crustáceos, moluscos musgos e outros. As florestas de mangás absorvem mais dióxido de carbono do que qualquer outra floresta terrestre. Facto este crucial no combate às alterações climáticas.
A Sonangol prestará todo o suporte logístico para que a OTCHIVA intensifique as campanhas de restauração e conservação dos mangás que serão reflorestados, assim como análises periódicas dos níveis de contaminação da água, dos solos, do ar e da vegetação. O projeto Sonangol Carbono Azul contempla também programas de educação ambiental e empoderamento das comunidades da orla costeira, particularmente dos pescadores, operadores turísticos e promotores imobiliários, para permitir que os mesmos consigam fazer a gestão sustentável dos recursos proporcionados pelos ecossistemas dos mangais.
Os mangais são, sem dúvida, um importante ecossistema contra as alterações climáticas pela sua grande capacidade de absorção de dióxido de carbono. Mas mais do que a proteção dos ecossistemas, é necessário prestar todo o apoio possível às comunidades que dependem do mar para a sua subsistência, sobretudo os pescadores. É importante que as comunidades residentes nestes locais sejam devidamente sensibilizadas, de forma a não verem os mangais apenas como uma fonte de extração de madeira para lenha e carvão.
Com o projeto Sonangol Carbono Azul, a Sonangol e a OTCHIVA dão início a uma nova era na indústria petrolífera em Angola, apostando nos créditos de carbono para mitigar o impacto das emissões de gases com efeito de estufa e tendo como foco a conservação dos mangais, envolvendo as comunidades locais.
Muito obrigada a todos mais uma vez. Podemos então passar para o momento de perguntas e respostas. Quem tiver alguma pergunta, por favor.
Thank you very much, everybody. We're now going to move on to the question and answer section, if anybody's got any questions.
Hi, my name is Kim. I work for the Environmental Investigation Agency. My question would go to you, Mr. Martins. I was very interested into your presentation on the implementation mechanism and the adaptation measures you've put in place in the country. I was wondering if you had such a program also for methane emissions from the energy sector.
Okay, very good. Thank you. No, we don't have a specific program for the reduction of methane emissions out of electricity production. We are looking into methane. There is an important initiative that we've begun participating in to look at methane emissions specifically. From our policy document, however, there will be methane positive in its surrounding waste management, of course, which is we thought was a more important at the stage. But we're certainly participating in the methane reduction initiative, and with time, you will see those measures permeate action, including involving the extractive industries, the petroleum industry, and so on. Okay, thank you.
Alô? Boa tarde. Eu não ia colocar questão, mas é uma contribuição para dizer que sou da Guiné-Bissau, em que 9% do território da Guiné-Bissau é composta por ecossistema do mangal. E tivemos essa experiência igual ao OGIVA, mas estamos em face das mudanças climáticas. Quando se semeia e quando a maré não chega a esse espaço, porque a temperatura está a aumentar, a maré está a diminuir, incorremos o risco de que aquilo que plantamos acaba por morrer. E de mais a mais, a tendência de nós, os humanos, de plantar em linha reta, muitas das vezes não corresponde exatamente ao ecossistema do mangal, porque isso também tem os seus impactos. E desde os anos 90 adotamos esse princípio de semeio do mangal, mas agora evoluímos para a regeneração natural assistida, que é criar condições edafoclimatéricas para permitir que o próprio mangual se repolve de si mesmo e nós fazemos o seguimento e a monitoria. Isso é que eu gostaria de partilhar com a ONGIVA, para dizer que há outras experiências que podem evoluir, não só semear, mas também criar condições que a própria natureza faça o seu trabalho. Obrigado.
So it's not really a question; it's more of a contribution. I'm from Guinea-Bissau, where we've had this experience of regenerating mangrove areas since the 90s. However, due to climate change, what we found is that sometimes water has not been reaching these mangrove areas as it used to be. So that affects the whole project, and also the kind of tendency to plant on a straight line. So what we've moved on to do now is to invest to promote natural assisted regeneration, where basically we create the conditions for the mangroves to regenerate themselves, as opposed to just